As large parts of Pakistan are hit by unprecedented floods, the government is under mounting criticism for its apparent inability to cope with emergency situations. With an estimated 1 million people crying out for aid and leadership, what are the implications for the country if still more civilians lose faith in the power of their government? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Taimur Nabili. Pakistan's been hit by the worst floods in living memory. An unprecedented 12 inches of rain fell in just 36 hours. The authorities have said the worst is now over, but the full scale of the devastation has yet to be assessed. The estimated death toll is edging towards 1,000, with up to 1 million thought to be affected. But a slow government response to the disaster so far has left a mood of rising anger in Pakistan. Stephanie Decker has more.
Help has still not reached here. In Nowshera city in Pakistan's northwest, evidence of people's lost livelihoods, lifeless in the water.
My 2 oxen, 8 buffaloes and 2 cows have died in the floods. Just found one alive. This buffalo has been kept in the second floor of our house for 3 days.
As the waters recede, many return to what is left of their home. There is growing frustration here.
No one has come here to inquire about our well-being, no official, no politicians. We hardly have any water or food left.
My son drowned. The government is not taking care of us. It has not managed to find any alternative place for us to move to.
But in other areas, the army's presence is being felt. It says it's lifted about 50 tons of rations to the badly affected areas, that they are doing the best they can.
A total of over 19,000 people have been rescued from marooned areas. It's a very huge number. But as I said, the level of devastation is so widespread, so large, that it is quite possible that in many areas there are damages, there are deaths which may not have been reported.
The threat of disease now also very real. There have been reports of cholera, and aid agencies are warning that the spread of waterborne diseases could prove disastrous. But getting anything, anywhere, quickly here is proving a real challenge. Bridges lie broken and roads have been swept away. Those who have already waited so long for help may be waiting a little longer. Stephanie Decker for Inside Story.
On the programme today, I'm joined from Islamabad by the retired Army General Talat Masood and from Lahore, Imtiaz Alam, the editor of the South Asian Journal. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Both of you have been seeing these events unfold over the course of the past couple of days and witnessing the problems and the defences being put forward by the government. I want to get both your opinions on what you think the situation is and where the blame, if any, should be apportioned. Let me start with you, Talat Masood. What's your opinion?
Well, I think Pakistan today has suffered one of the most overwhelming sort of calamities, both man-made as well as natural, in a very quick period of time, in a matter of within a month. It's not just a question of facing a lot of terrorist attacks in sequence, and at the same time followed by torrential rains and floods, and at the same time one of the worst disasters, airplane disasters in the history of Pakistan. So all these things have really added to the misery. I think the government is completely overwhelmed as it is.
Yes.
Its governance has always been very poor.
Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, we know what the problems are. We're seeing them on a daily basis. My question to you is, do you think the government could have done better?
Well, I think they could have done better, but the problem is that the government has really not applied itself to governance and has not been prepared for any crisis management. And it's also a reflection, in a way, as to how Pakistan has neglected its infrastructure and how it has not dealt with really the real problems of the people of Pakistan, because you know most of these things were expected, in the sense that this time it was predicted that the rainfall would be very heavy. There were every possibility of areas flooding, and I think they did not raise either the awareness, and they did not prepare either the provinces, nor the provinces, nor the community, nor at the federal level. They were prepared.
Let me stop you there and go to Imtiaz Alam. As Talat Masood was saying, it's not as if this came as a bit of a shock to anybody, is it? Let me just quote to you from one of the newspapers, the Express Tribune, who says, for weeks the Met Office has been warning the monsoon this year will be heavier than usual. It's not too much to ask why preparatory steps were not taken. They've got a point, don't they?
You see, that enormity of this crisis is so big, which is heavier than government's resources and machinery and all kinds of equipment, boats and emergency aid and air support, all kinds of these things. Perhaps the government had not fully prepared for this, in the sense that they lacked the required resources. Well, but still, I would say that the kind of disaster which has struck the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the Saraiki belt, and it will be now going to Sindh, I think that they have come pretty good in the sense in the later period.
Well, you say not fully prepared. We're not talking about fully prepared. They weren't prepared at all. The fact is that, as the paper pointed out, these monsoon rains were expected to be heavy. We've had heavy monsoon rains for the past 2 years. Flooding is a normal annual event. They weren't ready for any kind of flooding, let alone the kind of unprecedented floods that we've seen this year.
You see that this is the worst flood after 1929. More than 62 years ago, there was a flood of this nature. And the kind of water which is flowing, which is above 900,000 cusics, which passed to Chashma barrage, was even the highest of the record.
We are aware
set in
of
1976.
This. We know exactly how bad these floods are. The point here is that it's not a matter of insufficient preparation, it's an absence of preparation altogether. They sent 4 helicopters in the first day, which is hardly enough to do anything.
You see that the weather was so bad that in most of the daytime they could not fly the helicopters, and yet they did, and they rescued a lot of people from the areas like Chasada and Nowshera and other places. But it has spread out to such a large area that it was very difficult to cope with the kind of situation we were faced with.
Let's go back to Talat Masood then, and I'll quote to you from the Dawn newspaper. It's not just the fact that the helicopters couldn't fly in the rain, as our other guest was saying. They're talking about ill-conceived evacuation plans, shortage of boats and helicopters, sparse provision of food and other relief goods. Every step of the way, it seems, everyone is complaining that not enough was done or seen to be done.
Well, I think it's absolutely true. Actually, crisis management, and particularly when you knew that something like this would happen, I think they need to have prepared it in great detail. What we are lacking, as I said earlier, is that the governance is so weak that they are only believe in crisis management once the event takes place. But these events will take place in a much faster sequence if the government does not take some very both short-term as well as long-term preventive measures. And this is exactly what has happened. And what is being written, I think there is sometimes a very fair criticism. But at the same time, in defense of the government, I would say that the nature of the calamity also was overwhelming. And as you know, the government has been facing one crisis after the other. That is different. That why this crisis is there is a point which we need to discuss in great detail. Why is it that Pakistan today is engulfed with such enormous crisis, and why are they multiplying? Because there is a fundamental weakness in the system.
Well, let me ask you about the point you just made. The governance is so weak. That was your initial point. Explain a little bit more. Expand on what you mean by that.
You see, the thing is that you have to have, firstly, an administrative machinery which is functional. And that has to be at all levels, whether it be at the district, at the province, at the federal level. And there has to be a certain community leadership at the local level, at the provincial level, and at the national level. What we are seeing is that firstly there is a great vacuum of leadership, except that you have, of course, certain individuals here and there who are showing courage and leadership. But apart from that, what we are really seeing is that there is a great vacuum and a great deficit of leadership. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that, governance means you have to really deliver. You have to deliver in terms of physical infrastructure. You have to deal with many other aspects. I mean, for instance, as you rightly pointed out in the papers, and everyone has been expecting that whenever there are floods, areas are cut off. Was any effort made in order to store certain items which are essential as life-saving items, medicines, food, and so on? It wasn't done. And then, obviously, everything has to be relied on the military, which is also, in a way, Pakistan's whole focus is wrong. Because, the civil has to take care.
Let me stop you there for a minute, if we could. And put that point to Imtiaz Alam, the weakness of governance and the lack of administrative capacity to deal with this kind of situation. Do you agree with that analysis?
You see that perhaps my friend General Talal Hussain is speaking in very idealistic terms. It is always relative. We have certain numbers of helicopters, we have certain numbers of trucks, we have certain level of disaster management capacities. We did develop, due to the last unfortunate earthquake in Jammu and Kashmir a few years back. And in fact, that is the only capacity we could develop, and perhaps that is also being used now. I do agree with Mr. Talat Hussain that there were warnings, and the government should have prepared for this in a massive way and mobilized resources and machinery much earlier. But however, what I see is, as compared to the previous efforts, this time I see some kind of an action when it is needed.
Well, let me stop you there, because, again, I come back to the point that so many people are not seeing the action where it's needed. Mr. Talat Masood pointed out a vacuum of leadership, and you're saying he's being idealistic. Let me quote you again from the Nation newspaper this time. They call it rank apathy, and they ask, in this moment of crisis, when the only concern troubling the president should have been ensuring the provision of help and succour, why then is he thought it fit to pay a visit abroad?
You see, indeed, yes, Mr. Zardari has come under criticism that he should not be going out. But at the same time, I don't think that you stop all functions of the state. Yes, indeed, people are making complaints, and they are right, because their houses have destroyed and have been swept away. Their kettles have been swept away. Their belongings have been swept away. But I would say I'll give full marks to the government of Pakhtunkhwa that they have been very active and they have been on the forefront. And essentially, this is a provincial matter. If some measures are to be taken, that will be at the provincial level. And then coordinated at the central level.
Let me move the conversation on then a little bit, gentlemen, if I could, to address one of the potential outcomes of this vacuum of leadership that Talat Masood is predicting. And again, I'll quote from one of the newspapers there. The Dawn newspaper says, and I quote, "The failure to provide good governance breeds conditions that allow extremism to thrive." Talat Masood, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think personally that it will feed into extremism if we are not careful, because this is exactly what they have been exploiting. I mean, if you look at the whole phenomena of Talibanization, what is it? After all, it is poor governance, because everything that they ask, they want to do sort of, and people seem to support some of them, is because they think that at least they can get something out of them. What is all that? One is, of course, their own personal security. The other is some sort of justice. The other is some sort of delivery. Although, of course, it is in such a crude manner and it is so brutal. And that is another aspect, and the ideology is so retrogressive. But the fact is that this is exactly what they would exploit now. And what we have also seen, even during, as you know, I don't know whether one would recall, that, after the earthquake, when the government didn't move very fast, and some of these militant organizations, they also have their sort of political and social component, and they went into operation and started providing relief work. So I have a feeling that this might exactly be the case. Yeah,
I think you're talking about the Jamaat the Jamaat Dawa who moved in after the earthquake
absolutely.
And provided the kind of leadership that
and
the government
it is not
didn't.
Only just
Imtiaz Alam, well, I mean, what do you say to that?
Absolutely.
You're saying this should be government at a provincial level, but it's very clear that at provincial level, it's some of the insurgents and some of the extremists that are providing better services than the government.
No, when we saw the displaced people from Malacca Agency, we didn't see these groups providing support, except the Jamaat Islami keeping its boats there and with small presence. The massive support was provided by the army and the major political parties and the government and the officials, and moreover, above all, the people. Even when the earthquake took place, these were people of Pakistan who, in millions, mobilized their resources and went to all those remote areas and provided support to the people. And this was just Lashkar-e-Dawa, this Jamaat Dawa's presence was just token in some pockets, and that was projected beyond any proportion in the media.
All right, well,
the real support was mobilized at the grassroops level.
So
I know that I have talked to many friends in.
So let me ask you this. We have this flooding is occurring in and around the Swat Valley, where we've got a serious failure of governance already. We've got already people willing to impose Taliban law and a local civilian population that may well be willing to accept it in the absence of any alternatives. Do you think we're going to come out of? Go ahead.
I don't accept this hypothesis. You see that when people have gone back, they have stood the test of the opposition, and they have confronted the extremists, and they are not letting them come back. And the same people will be surviving and will be standing up, and the local communities will be coming up, local organizations will be coming up, the youngsters will be coming up. And I have talked to people in many areas. People are very actively involved in helping each other.
Right.
We know that there is no well-established local state machinery. How will you have good governance or any kind of governance when there is no machinery in some areas? But I know that in Swat or in Nowshera, the flood is very high and devastation is very high. There are good efforts going on there, and there are good efforts going on in the southern Punjab. And similarly, the Sindh is much more prepared now when it goes, the high tide of flood goes from 3rd August onwards.
All right, Talat Masood, I mean, the question here is not whether there is hope and intent and a desire to provide good governance. The question is it significant, is it sufficient, and what will the outcome be in areas that, as we say, governance and the infrastructure of governance has already broken down? How do you see that area progressing in the coming weeks and months?
Well, I think they have to, otherwise, it would be very serious, because there would be great unrest, and there would be great loss of life, and there would be great misery all around. And as we said earlier, this could be having very dangerous impact on the overall security situation as well, apart from any.
But is the army in a position to handle any of this?
Well, I think the army is doing a very good job in the sense that they also have the resources. The problem is that the civilians, I mean, we have to really understand this, that in Pakistan, the real resources have always gone to the military, which has been unfortunate because of the geostrategic position or the way that Pakistan has developed into a security state. So most of the resources, whatever tax money or whatever assistance one gets internationally, most of it is is siphoned into the military. So
All
they
right.
have a large number of resources, and the expectations of everyone is that it's the military which will salvage them even in matters of crisis like this,
Well,
whereas it should have been the reverse. And there also has to be a national emergency. You know, what I feel is that whereas it's a provincial subject, but the fact is this is a national emergency.
You talk about resources. A lot of them go to the army, as you say, but cynics would say quite a lot of them also go into the pockets of a lot of officials who are corrupt. Imtiaz Alam, do you think that the corruption issue here is actually contributing to the weakness of governance that we've been discussing?
Yes, there are the issues of corruption. They are quite serious issues. But the real test will come now after the floods go down and people will go back to their homes. They would like to have some support for reconstruction of their homes and rehabilitation of their business and farms. I think the government must prepare for that, and the government will have to devote resources from other development schemes and other provisions so that they could meet these pressing needs of the people and who are in need of great help. And I think the international community should also come forward to help these people. And if we do not provide for what they need, the people who have been who have got upset with these floods and who they need support.
We're coming to the last minute of the show. Let me give the final answer to Talat Masood, because Imtiaz Alam there mentioned the international community coming into this equation. Let me ask you whether you think that the international community is going to be willing to come in this particular instance. We've not only had all this talk of corruption, we've not only had all the problems that Pakistan has had with the international community anyway, we've suddenly had this whole WikiLeaks episode exploding, in which the idea that Pakistan may be less than a good friend to many of the aid-providing countries could be a significant issue. Do you think that this is going to play out in a way that's going to be detrimental to the people and the governance of Pakistan?
Well, I think the international community today should look at it as a grave humanitarian problem. And if it equates it with, things like these, which are really the fault of the leadership and of the, military and the political parties and so on, which are the elite, I think it would be very wrong on their part.
But it's the leadership and the elite who receive the funds from the international community and are responsible for distributing those funds. So why should they provide the funds to the leadership?
Absolutely. I agree with you. I agree with you that, corruption is a very serious issue, and that does not give confidence to the international community that the money and the resources that they would probably be willing to sort of give to Pakistan would be correctly used. So this is a major issue, and that is why we thought that it would have been very wise on the part of the leadership today to really stay within the country and really look after them. Look, in China, a major accident took place, and there was a G20 meeting, and the Chinese president did not go for that meeting, just to show in a symbolic way that he was with the people in China. So I think we should have, President Zardari could have, for the sake of giving support to the people of Pakistan, should have stayed in country rather than go at this hour.
There we will have to leave it, gentlemen. Thank you both very much for joining us today. Talat Masood in Islamabad, Imtiaz Alam in Lahore, and thank you for joining us for this edition of Inside Story. We always welcome your comments and suggestions about the show. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. That's it for the moment. Goodbye until next time.